Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the big news. The topic for today's discussion: China headed towards COVID disaster. Before we understand what this topic is in greater detail, a quick gentle reminder. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS is now on Telegram. If you have not joined the channel, please do join so that you get all the current affairs related updates. Let's get started and try and understand everything about this topic. We have the Chinese authorities who had imposed lockdowns in China. People were not happy with it, so what did they do? They go about protesting against the government, and as a result, the government now has lifted the lockdown in couple of districts due to protest against the zero COVID strategy of the government. So the Chinese government issued new guidelines easing some of its strict zero COVID policies. Testing requirements and travel restrictions have been relaxed, and people infected with SARS-CoV-2 who have mild or no symptoms are for the first time allowed to isolate at home instead of in centrally managed facilities. It is in this particular backdrop we have to understand what is this zero COVID strategy. When we speak about this strategy, it is a strategy that aims to drive down the number of COVID-19 cases by imposing strict lockdowns, closing borders and imposing travel bans. When COVID-19 stuck in 2019 and then it became too much in 2020, many countries did not know how they should go about conducting or preventing the spread of the COVID-19 issue. So what did countries do? Countries in Europe, in India as well, what we imposed was lockdown. So initially we did not have any idea as to how to control the spread of COVID-19. So at the start of COVID-19, it is good that countries imposed lockdown. But over a period of time, countries did open up their economy as well. They felt that imposing this lockdown was not the right way, as people would not get immune system response, and at the same time the economy is getting harmed as well. So over a period of time, these strict lockdowns were opened up. They were lifted. Why? Because we had the vaccines, economy was also not doing good, so economy had to be given the boost as well. So on one side, we had the vaccines, and they also felt that this would require immune response from the body, natural booster from the body. So they opened up the economy. But that was not the same when it comes to China. Every known case, even asymptomatic, was mandatorily hospitalized. Small outbreaks triggered hard lockdowns as well, and suspected cases and all contacts were kept under long isolation. Despite they giving the vaccines, despite their economy not doing good, what China wanted to ensure was a zero COVID policy. What is zero COVID policy? That they wanted to completely root out COVID from China, and as a result, they imposed strict lockdowns despite giving vaccines to the people in their country. So, what were the measures that they took? They ensured that there were strict lockdowns imposed by the local authorities. There was mass testing centers that were opened up in multiple places. People with COVID were isolated at home. They were placed under quarantine at government hospitals. Businesses, schools, so on and so forth were ultimately closed as well. Shops were closed as well, except for selling the food. And finally, lockdowns continued until no infections was reported in that particular area. So what is the problem with this? When this particular policy continues to happen, people will not get the immune response. So let's say, for example, the vast majority of China have not been infected. Why? Because they are not now exposed to the virus. When you consider countries like India, or you consider countries like United States of America, or you consider countries in Europe like Italy, so on and so forth, these people were exposed to the virus. So there is a natural immunity that is developed. But when it comes to China, people are not exposed to the virus, and as a result, even if there is a small variant that enters, their body is not gonna accept. Added to it, the vaccines that have been developed in China were not able to prevent the spread of COVID-19 as well. And we also know for the fact that variants keep coming up, they keep changing as well. They also have an immune response as well, and ultimately What China has been able to do is that because of a zero COVID strategy, which is continued to operate, these people do not have the natural immunity. The vaccines are not able to stop, and ultimately, it is the people who are suffering. So, initially, this zero COVID strategy was good because we did not know how to go about things. But over a period of time, this should have been ideally lifted so that people generate and they have a natural boost or natural immunity. But then the people in China were not exposed to the virus, and this zero COVID strategy right now has become disastrous for China because every other country opened up its economy. They were given other set of vaccines as well, and they had a natural immune response to this virus. But in China, because the zero COVID strategy continued, they did not have the natural response to it. The vaccines are not working out as well, and ultimately people are continuing to suffer because of this particular issue. What about its vaccine strategy? Its vaccination priority list focused on the healthy young adults. It didn't promote the vaccine to elderly groups until November 2021, but by this time considerable vaccine skepticism had also built up, raising concerns about the low effectiveness of the non-mRNA Chinese vaccines were also a concern. Studies indicated that protection faded fast and was undetectable after 6 months. Recent reports suggest that only about 40% of over 80s have received a booster shot and millions still remain unvaccinated. To put this in perspective, the overall booster rate was more than 90% in Japan, while only 68% in China. This is where we understand the vaccination was not given to the people in China. When you look at the policies of the country, let's say for example in India, how was the policy of India? First, what was targeted were the senior citizens, because the senior citizens are the first who have to be given the vaccines. The healthcare workers have to be given the vaccines. People who are the public servants, they have to be given the vaccines. So the concentration initially was on the senior citizens. But how did China start working? China started working in an opposite way, where young people were given the vaccines first and not the senior citizens. And over a period of time, this ultimately developed into vaccine hesitancy because the vaccine efficiency was not intact. The numbers were not proving the efficacy of the vaccine. On one side, the adults who should have been given, the senior citizens who should have been given the vaccine, they were not given, but young adults were given. And at the same time, because the efficiency was not working, what stepped in was vaccine hesitancy within China as well. And they were also scared about the personal safety, and they did not go about taking the vaccines. So large number of people were not happy about it. They wanted to go against the government because they were suffocated with this zero COVID strategy. They were not able to meet their near and dear ones. They were not able to conduct their daily activities, and ultimately the government had to succumb to the pressure, and now they have brought about changes when it comes to the rules. So what have the Chinese government done? The lockdowns now targeted to buildings, units or floors rather than to the whole neighborhood or cities. High risk areas to come out of lockdown in 5 days if no new cases are found. Schools to remain open if there is no wider campus outbreak. People with COVID no longer required to go to a centralized quarantine facility. PCR tests are no longer required to enter public transport, restaurants, gyms, and other public buildings, with the exception of schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. Lateral flow tests to replace PCR tests in most cases. Inter province travel restrictions lifted. National tracking app have also been discontinued as well. With this particular issue, there is a new question. The question is that people are not exposed to the existing COVID 19 viruses. This means more COVID 19 variants may step in as well, and added to it, this can lead to public health concerns and emergency. So, an uncontrolled break now can happen in China because once these lockdowns are opened, since people are not exposed to the viruses, there can be new variants that can step in, and ultimately it can result in health disaster as well. One of the most important question is how has it impacted the Chinese economy? Lockdowns have led to factories and ports being shut down for longer periods. They have also affected work with the foreign companies as well. It means the China's economy has grown by only 3.9% over the past year, compared with its target of 5.5% for 2022. Unemployment is also rising as well, especially amongst young people, and property is also losing its value. The real estate has also fallen. In fact, many people also predict that there is similar crisis that happened in 2008 happening in China with respect to the real estate sector. China's lockdown measures are also affecting businesses and consumers in the rest of the world who have come to rely on China for supplies of the goods. Since China is a manufacturing hub, it exports a lot of products as well, and all those countries and its people who are relying on China's products, they are also feeling the heat of zero COVID strategy. A lockdown at Fox plant in Zhengzhou hit the production of iPhones, leading to fears of a worldwide shortage, and factory closures have also led to fears of a shortage of toys ahead of Christmas. So this issue basically goes on to say that if zero COVID strategy is lifted, because there have been protests in China, and if this happens, there will be large scale disaster for China. Between 1.3 and 2.1 million lives could be at risk if China lifts its zero COVID policy, given low vaccination and booster rates, as well as a lack of hybrid immunity, according to the London based Global Health Intelligence and Analytics firm. It says mainland China has very low levels of immunity across its population. Its citizens were vaccinated with domestically produced jabs, Sinovac and Sinopharm, which have proven to be significantly lower efficacy and provide less protection against infection and death. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this issue. So, this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.